Welcome to the AI for You Cafe for live presentations around AI. The speaker today is Joseph Baker Brunbauer from Social Tech Lab. Hello, Joseph.
Hello.
Hello. Great you're here. With his talk on how to overcome the barrier to kick off trustworthy AI implementation. My name is Carmen McWilliams, and I'm the moderator and organizer of this cafe. I'm the director of the company Grassroots Arts and partner in the European AI project. Always in the beginning, the regulations. Please take notice that the session will be recorded. No confidential information shall be shared in this cafe session. In this cafe, the speaker expresses his or her personal view and opinion. This is not necessarily the official AI for You project opinion. So what's the AI Cafe about? This is an online forum to gain insight into the European AI scene. Participants get the chance to share knowledge and experiences and meet stakeholders from various areas of the AI research and applications. Again, welcome everybody. All the participants just coming in the cafe. Great you're here today. Thank you that you're coming, and it's interactive. Always we need your cooperation. Please ask great questions to the speaker, and I will read your questions afterwards to Joseph. So please use the panel on the right side. It's there, you can type in your questions. And now I will introduce you the highlight of the cafe today. Our speaker today, as said before, is Joseph Baker Brunbauer. He worked for 20 years in different industry areas for startups and established companies in international projects for market-leading clients. He is consulting companies about business model innovation, product innovation, change and digital transformation projects through his consulting company, Product XYZ, and leading AI ethics research projects at Social Tech Lab. He holds an MBA in International Business Administration from LIMAK Johannes Kepler University, Austria, and Tsinghua University, China, an engineering degree in software engineering, a diploma in life counseling and coaching, a master's degree in psychosocial counseling from the Karl Franz University in Austria, a diploma in product management from Marketing Academy Munich and University of Applied Science Upper Austria. And he is book author and member of the European Commission AI Alliance. Wow, what an education. Impressive, and we are happy we have you here today in the cafe. So I'm happy to give you now the floor, as the participants and audience came for you. And I change now the presenter role, so you can introduce yourself and say hello to everybody.
Okay, then thank you very much, first of all, Carmen, for the invitation, and it's a pleasure for me to present today. As well, a warm welcome to all of the participants at the AI for You coffee. I would like to welcome you to my talk about how to overcome the barrier to kick off trustworthy AI implementation. No, I just sorry for all of these technical problems, but unfortunately that's how it's happened sometimes.
Yeah, but it's no problem.
Yeah. Okay, so first of all, let me introduce Social Tech Lab. Well, I founded Social Tech Lab in Austria in 2019, and it's actually based on my research that I have done at the University of Graz. And what we are doing socio-technical research and consulting, and we are building the bridge between academia and businesses. So therefore, we focus on digital technology and its social impact. And we offer different kind of workshops, consulting, as well as project management. Before I would like to start with my talk, I also would like to define the term AI system, how I understand it, just to bring us all on the same page. While I'm using the term based actually of the Council of Europe, where they define it like AI system should be seen as a socio-technical system whose impact is not only based on the design, instead it considers its broader environment, including purpose, training data, functionality, accuracy, scale of deployment, and as well the broader organizational, societal, and legal context. So when we speak about AI ethics, actually, then I also want to highlight some different broader perspectives. First of all, when we speak about it, it will also include some new ethical challenges. So AI ethics also brings up topics like the ethics of data, ethics of algorithms, ethics of practices and resources. And as well, AI ethics is part of the whole ethics topic. So when we speak about AI ethics within organizations, then we also need to speak about ethics as well. And AI ethics itself has a multidisciplinary meta view, and it should be alignment on the top level, and it will also probably highlight and raise unconscious dependencies, and has alignment or connections as well to the corporate social responsibility. And to start with, the translation of ethical principles is possibly not the best starting point. So why I say this, I will come closer within the next slides. The last term that I just want to clarify is when we speak about trustworthy AI, what is trustworthy AI? Because it's also a term that is frequently used currently in the media, and people have different understanding and expectations. So therefore, I want to use the definition of the European Commission, which says that it covers an ecosystem of excellence along the value chain, from research to innovation to creating acceleration incentives. Trustworthy AI should also shaped within an ecosystem of trust, based on the European fundamental rights and rules to give users the trust and confidence to use AI systems. It should be lawful, ethical, robust through the whole life cycle. And it describes a human-centric and trustful development of AI systems to maximize the AI system benefits and minimize the risks. From the implementation point of view, it has as well technical implementations, but as well non-technical. I will explain this as well later on. So what I have done is I did actually bottom-up research, and therefore I was doing research to analyze the management perspective of ethics and the social impact of AI systems. So therefore, I conducted expert interviews of C-levels and executives within SME companies that are AI systems developer or deployer within Europe. And therefore, I focused mainly on the understandings of the definitions, prioritization, and motivations of the executives, stakeholders, and professions. So who are the people and which professions are working in the AI development teams, as well if they are already using any AI guidelines, certification, social responsibility, etc. So some findings what this research actually showed that is that there were some awareness within the companies, but currently no implementation of AI ethics. They were aware of international and also national guidelines and ethical principles, but there were also some confusion because they are all non-binding, and then it is somehow difficult what to follow and which one will be maybe more important than others. then I identified also a transfer and implementation gap based on missing skills and resources. So there were, for example, not dedicated people within the organizations who are responsible for ethical or AI ethic topics. And even if I went on a more holistic level and analyzing existing or non-existing company values, then it showed up that there were actually also no implicit company values. And there were sometimes the case that they were just communicated from the management, but there was not really any strategy how to implement them within the companies. Another finding was, for example, always as well the mentioned point about missing resources. So that about the implementation of AI ethics is as well taking time, money, and other resources. And then it's always easily in a conflict of prioritization, which the companies or the organizations will start to work on as a next working package. And another finding was that the practical implementation quite often differs from theory. As well, that there were some questions about, is it too early to think about AI ethics or even to implement AI ethics within the companies? So that is always a point from which side you look on the topic, because if you shape the systems now and you build on the systems in the future, or other systems are building on the existing AI systems, then from that point of view, it's probably not too early. But of course, that is now all the findings from an organizational, from an SME company management perspective, which differs probably from other perspectives. Then there were other findings, like there was not really any implementation support, so orienteering, no clear focus. They even don't really know where to start with, even if they were interested in the topic. So therefore, I want to propose the TAI framework. So it's the Trustworthy AI Implementation Framework, which actually will tackle exactly the challenges that those companies, SMEs, mentioned. So it kickoffs AI ethics implementation, and it oriented on the ethic guidelines for trustworthy AI of the European Commission. But in the end, you can theoretically also use other guidelines, so it is not fixed to those ones, but as well, especially for the European companies, it's recommended and highlighted to consider those upcoming guidelines. The framework itself also creates a meta perspective of the systemic dependencies of the organization's ecosystem. So that means the framework itself is not a technical guideline. So I will not talk today about any technical implementation. So it is really a non-technical holistic approach, which considers all the stakeholders and the systemic dependencies within the organization. So it's also no need for any deep background in philosophy or psychology or anything like this to actually start implementing or working with the framework. And it includes as well perspectives of social impact and outside the software and data engineering setting. So there is also on the website a listed article and papers that you might be able to interested to follow up within the framework. You will also find on the website socialtechlab.eu the infographic, which is shown on this slide, which actually shows the 12-step guidance when you fulfill one iterative cycle of the framework. So it is also a continuous iterative process through the whole AI system lifecycle. And you can easily start working with it if you just take the first iterative, for example, on a more holistic, even broader approach, just to go through all the steps. And with each iteration, you can go more into detail, and you can even go deeper into more details which fits your product, service, or the specific context and use cases. And it's also flexible and adaptable for specific use cases and upcoming legal requirements, for example. So I would like to go through the 12 steps with you, just to generate a general understanding for the framework. The first 2 points actually are preliminary. So that means probably they even exist already in the company. So if you would like to try the framework, then you need to see what is already there on information or what maybe is still not existing. And then it's maybe even a good opportunity to start working on that points. So first one, it's the company values. Well, company culture is based on ethics, moral, and values. So the question is as well, like, what kind of values does the company in general as an organization defines for themselves, how they want either to operate the business, but as well what they want to put on the products or services. Why it is also important to define the company values is if maybe you focus only on AI ethics implementation within the AI system, on the algorithm, or within the data, that may also cause contradictions within the company values that maybe even you are not aware of it. So that's why it's important firsthand just to work on the values, to define them as well. And as well to create, for example, an ethics board within the organization, because that is also already important. Who will implement this process within the organization? Who will actually be the one who drives this process? And as well, who in general is responsible for AI ethics within the organization? And the company values itself will as well not only affect AI ethics, so it will also have an impact, of course, on the business model and on the AI system brief overview, which are the following steps. The next one is also preliminary, and maybe already it's existing, is to think about the business model as well from the organization. So therefore, I propose at least to visualize the existing business model, or maybe the future business model of the AI system that you are planning to develop. And this you don't need to do in first hand in detail. So at least it gives a visualization, and you can even work more in detail in this. Probably most of the organizations or companies have already a written business model. Maybe even they have visualized this. Here I just placed 2 examples, like the business model canvas, for example, which is frequently used within organizations to visualize the business model. If you have even more interest in this topic, I also published a book in 2019. So it's The Secret Key, Business Model Innovation for Established Companies, where you can also find further information about business modeling in general. And as well, finally, also think about patents within the business model and of your company and the AI system, because that can also be important regarding competition as well. If you have any kind of invention or you create new procedures within AI systems, that you can already implement patents, because maybe that will also affect the design of the AI system later on. And that is good to consider already in the beginning. The next step is the AI system brief overview. And that can be seen as a short checklist, so to say. which you can go through. First of all, a very important one is to think about, okay, what's actually the purpose of my AI system that I want to develop, or maybe I'm even already running it. So what is the need? What is the use case behind, for example? How does it look like? Who is involved? What kind of training data or input data do I use? From where is it coming? Is there any bias? And if yes, can we reduce the bias? And how to handle the training data issue in general. So all that are very important points. As well, to give the whole AI ethics project a priority, because is that just a side project within the company, or is it priority number one based on regulation, based on market, based on consumer feedback, etc. So that must be clear from the beginning in best case as well. And of course, as well, when we speak about trustworthy AI systems, then we also should define on that point, like, what do we understand about trustworthiness, and how do we gain trust, and why do we want to gain trust, and how is actually the AI system that I'm working on or that I'm developing, how is it generating trust? Then there are other points like resources, commitment, responsibility, who's the process owner of the framework, who's pushing this internally, and as well the iteration interval to define, because when you have these 12 steps in the circle, do you need to go through this like once per week, once per month, once per year? So you need to find the interval which fits, of course, your AI system. And that depends, of course, on the product, on the technology, on the company size, on the market. So there are different settings. There's not a one-fits-all approach. So that needs to be chosen, especially for your use case. And as well, last point, to think about diversity as well from the beginning. To have, for example, diverse teams. I just want to show you two short diagrams, which are from the HI department of the Stanford University, which still shows a little bit like on the one side the gender gap, so to say, and on the other side about ethnicity, about tenure track faculty members, and also to think about how is actually your team within the organization structured. Are they all the same, or do you already consider this within the development of your AI system? Well, the next point is the stakeholder analysis. So it's also important to think about who is actually involved in the development of the AI system. What kind of people or groups are those? Are these probably internally and external, different departments, companies, organizations, institutions, or even clusters? It's recommended actually to name a specific responsible persona, and as well to categorize the roles. Let's say, like, if you have groups and then you have the representative, the persona of the group, as well, that you add them roles like, are those decision makers, for example, or are they suppliers, developers, or maybe external auditors, whatever. So this is important to be aware of the people who are actually involved in the process. That can be, depending on the company structure or on the product, quite complex. So to reduce a bit complexity, it showed up that it works perfectly fine if you do this, for example, in a 2-time iteration, that in the first round, just defining the groups and the departments, for example, and then in another iteration, you can go even more into detail. Important as well is to document the whole process, and therefore documentation also leads actually to transparency. So that is now written on that point, but it's actually valid for all 12 ones, that you should always focus on documentation as well, which you can then use either for internally or for external, being transparent, as well for maybe upcoming future audits, for example. The next point is justice. So you also need to consider existing regulations and standards, for example, like Data Governance Act, the Open Data Directive, or the EU Strategy for Data, for example. And important is as well to understand that it is also specific for the specific AI system within the area of application and its context space. That means if we just take as an example, facial recognition. So that can underlie different legal or law regulations depending on the context or on the application. Can be classified more as a risk or maybe not. So that is as well important to differentiate. Then also, especially like within the European Union, there's the coordinated plan on AI of the European Commission to safeguard a high standard of transparency, respect for democratic values and legitimacy. And as well, the upcoming regulations that was now, they were proposed in April 21 by the European Commission. And important is as well that legal conformity is not the same like, for example, acting ethically. So also if you are maybe in some situations legally conform, you are maybe not ethically, or there is no verification or no proof, depending how it is implemented. So that means you need to focus on that point, number 5, on the legal conformity. But that is still not the same that you are ethically, that you are doing acting ethically. And another point to consider is the global market. That means as well, when you analyze the legal regulations and the laws, then when you want, for example, to sell your AI system that you operate maybe in a worldwide international setting, you will deal probably with different regulations. So that might be that, let's say, there's a regulation within Europe, but maybe in North America and in the USA, it is a different one compared to Asia or other countries. That brings me to a short overview just of the proposed legal framework from the European Commission in April 21, which says that AI systems should be safe, transparent, ethical, unbiased, and under human control. And therefore, there are 4 different risk categories mentioned. So it is actually shaped like a pyramid, which is the highest risk is on the up. It's called the unacceptable risk, and the minimal risk in the bottom. So what are unacceptable risks? For example, those will be completely banned. At least that's what is written in the proposal. And just as examples that were mentioned, for example, it is like social scoring within the European countries or within the citizens. Or for example, another example that is mentioned are toys for children, for example, voice assistants are included, and probably monitoring the kids, which will probably not at that age have the understanding for the technology. Another factor or another risk level is the high risk level. This will cover AI systems in the area of critical infrastructure, educational training, safety components, employment and recruiting, public sector service, law enforcement, migration and border control, etc. examples therefore actually can be like autonomous driving, for example, or if we have automatical CV sorting or analyzations within the recruitment process, hiring process within companies, as well credit scoring, or for example, the verification of travel documents. And therefore, such applications will need to undergo an assessment before getting any market launch through the whole life cycle. The limited risk category has minimal transparency obligations and the interactions with the content to make informed decisions, and the user can still decide to continue or not. Examples, therefore, for example, is a chatbot. And the last category is the minimal risk, that is defined as actually minimal or no risk for citizen rights or safety. And this can be, for example, a spam filter or, for example, AI-enabled video games. If you are interested in those categories, for example, then I would like to refer to the annex of the European Commission legal framework proposal. In the annex, there are some further use cases mentioned that you can observe if your AI system probably will maybe, or in which category maybe it will be sorted in the future. Important as well is there will be probably new rules for AI risk system, for high risk AI systems. So there are 4 steps mentioned by the European Commission. So the step 1 is that when you have, for example, developed a high risk AI system, then it will need to undergo a conformity assessment. And as well in step 3, there will be a registration of the product in an EU database. And finally, there will be the need for a declaration of conformity. So very similar like the CE marking, what is already existing on the products. So what I want as well to demonstrate on this slide is that the step 1 here starts that you have already developed the AI system. And the TAI framework, for example, can help you already beforehand to consider a lot of AI ethical and systemic dependency, as well as common good factors within your development of the AI system, that you will probably not have the situation then that you need to make a conformity assessment and probably you fail and then you need to redo or adapt your whole R&D. So that is very important and actually a reason why organizations should consider AI ethics and using frameworks from the beginning to prepare in time for their systems to develop ethical or trustworthy AI systems. So back to the framework. Risks is number 6. So it will also require ethical impact, risk, and social impact assessment. So if you develop an AI system, just as well to consider the risks that are probably existing when you develop or launch the product. So therefore, there are different assessment methods depending as well on the legal requirements and the application area within your AI system. And the risk should demonstrate as well and show the potential harm and the affected human groups based on the intended and unintended results of the AI system. And it's important that ethical risk might be also unobservable or unquantifiable. And that is as well a challenge that needs to be considered within the development process. Therefore, I propose, for example, to use a two-dimensional risk matrix and risk areas, for example, as we have already mentioned before, health sector, industry, critical infrastructure, biometric identification, HR, etc., and of course, like law enforcement, weapons defense sector. And I also propose to use, for example, the TIE framework for low risk areas in the AI systems, where it will be not necessary to use any framework. Why do I think like this? Well, if you undergo all these 12 steps, I think first of all, you will learn quite much information about your business, about your AI system that you can use maybe within your value proposition, within market competition, etc., to communicate, to be more transparent as well. But you also will generate an awareness about the common good impact factors. Another diagram that I want to show is when we speak about risks, then there's actually on different levels the awareness, for example, within organization to risk adopting. So one of the biggest topic therefore is actually cybersecurity, but as well the regulatory compliance, explainability factors, for example, that are highly ranked. Step number 7, common good. So in this part of the framework, you compare the AI system that you are developing to the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. So therefore you can, for example, go through like to which of the 17 goals are you contributing in a positive or maybe in a negative way. But that will help you to understand as well where you can make either a good environmental or a good common good impact to the society, for example, but also maybe where you should look if you can find some other options that you will not generate any negative impact. The same actually is valid as well that you compare if you are conform to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And what is also important to mention is that within this assessment of the development goals, of the Sustainable Development Goals, it might be the case that some contradictions may arise within companies as well, because there will be maybe some points that maybe the organization never thought about, and that's totally fine. So it is at least firsthand to make an assessment. You just need to do this internally, but you can constantly work on that, you can improve, and as well, like for example, for future funding or maybe upcoming taxations, you can use this to show in which areas you contribute in a good way. And as well, as I mentioned beforehand, not to forget about the documentation. So finally, as a step 8, we come to the ethics topic. What is for some maybe the starting point, and here it's actually quite far in the end, as you see, because we went through many other points beforehand. So here it's actually the point to consider to use which kind of AI ethics guidelines and principles to define them, which are suitable for your AI system or for your legal requirements, or maybe you have different international requirements to fulfill or standardizations. The European Commission Trustworthy AI, for example, is defined by 4 principles and 7 key requirements. So it's human agency, oversight, robustness and safety, privacy and data governance, transparency, diversity, non-discrimination and fairness, societal and environmental well-being, and accountability. So this point is actually about to think and to define, okay, what kind of ethical values actually are important for my AI system or for the environment that the system will operate in. What is still important as well to note on that point is that the translation that comes later on of values and culture input into machine language, so to say, into AI systems will be not an easy task. So the next step is actually the translation, and therefore it's the mapping of the previous defined principles with the application related ecosystem. So also there is no one size fits all approach. So this needs also to be evaluated and defined, especially on either the technology and the use case and the context where you are using the technology. And as a help, for example, there is from the high-level expert group of the European Commission, there is an assessment list with some questions what can help companies, let's say, within the translation to start working with. When it comes to the translation itself, there are specific different other frameworks or guidelines. For example, I have mentioned here several different ones, but that is just some examples which go more into then the technical level, as well how to translate therefore the ethical values. Well, in the next step, it is a merge of all of the assessments, all of the information that we have gathered, everything what was created and defined within the company. So that is now where everything comes together and shaping the big picture and defining the current state. It will visualize dependencies, and you can also and should maybe then plan the next steps for the improvement. Yeah, execution is then it goes into building and into the product. So therefore you need to verify, test, implement the results, have clear responsibilities, as well the documentation process, which goes over all 12 steps, just also to prevent to generate any internal or external black boxes. As a last point, there is certification mentioned. So that depends, of course, now on your area where you are operating in or on your geographic area. There are already companies and organizations working on certification of AI systems. So that will probably definitely be a part that will arise even stronger in the future, that you can also, let's say, certify maybe the whole AI system or just parts or technology of it. And of course, if you undergo a certification, it will generate as well trust and transparency. Important is, of course, that you have an independent auditor and that you probably don't audit yourself. So that was a quick overview of the TAI framework and the 12 steps. When you have finished one iteration, then you just start with the first step as well. Just need to consider if there was probably no change within the company values, but the business model, for example, might be adaptable based on increasing of the or changing of the market or the technology change requirements from the consumer on the market. So this you need then maybe to adapt. And this iteration interval you need to define beforehand, and you also use this framework and the process within the whole AI system lifecycle. So what are some challenges? Well, implementation of unintentional negative consequences. So that means big challenge is, for example, that the AI system generates negative consequences, but those are actually unintentional. And this needs to be analyzed as well. Then there's a missing overview of ethical implications for the whole AI system and its environment. Then There might be conflicts, for example, between commercial interest and monetarization within organizations. Explainability, trust, accuracy, privacy, ethics. So it is also predictive accuracy and transparency. You need as well to have a clear understanding for the terms. And there's uncertainty about accountability and responsibilities for AI system developers. So also this, like if something will or might happen, who's responsible for it? Is it the developer, the company, the government? So that needs as well a frame set which defines who's accountable and responsible for the outcomes. Then there's a challenge within the translation from abstract principles to machine language, as I mentioned beforehand, and as well companies and organizations mentioned of resources and prioritization. So especially, for example, startups quite often mention that they don't have the resources for it to do it, and then they say, yeah, the big companies should start with it. Is that good or not? Is it about self-responsibility, or is it about having resources? And other challenges is, for example, to align within organizations. And therefore, probably it will need like an ethic or AI ethic manager who's as well pushing the topic within the company. And another challenge is, as I mentioned quickly beforehand, the responsibility of big tech companies, which have probably more resources to work on the topic and to shape it as well. So what are some solutions for the challenges? Well, it's a good approach to extend and split transparency and explainability into a technical and a general level, because not everything needs to be explained in a technical way, and not everyone can understand it in a technical way. So you need to generate the common understanding for the terms for all stakeholders. As mentioned before, documentation is a big key, classification system, risk assessment, and as well to not to forget the company culture, for example, to enable an open learning culture, to implement standards, certification, documentation, trainings within employees, very important as well. And then as well to implement the AI ethics officer or ethics board within the company or the organization who pushed the topic. And as I said beforehand, to focus on having a diverse and multidisciplinary team. As well, a long-term company culture commitment and implementation of technical and non-technical actions, like workshop, training, understanding, for example, are non-technical actions. Workshops, for example, can help and support to clarify terms and to generate a common understanding. The framework itself, for example, reduces uncertainties and abstract norms, and it has a general holistic picture, or it generates a holistic picture of the organizational systemic image. And it offers guidance during the whole AI systems lifecycle for organizations, and it supports to develop a minimal viable ethical product. So finally, just some key takeaways for you for today. What is important also of the outcome of the research is it is very good to have even more bottom-up research to get the ideas, the opinions, and the needs, for example, from the organizations, how they think, how they will be able to tackle the problems, the implementation, and what kind of guidance or support will they need. While there's no one solution that fits for all different kind of AI systems, so that will be also something specifically developed, and there might be tensions between principles and values. There are upcoming regulations, and documentation is the key to improve transparency and as well also to act and improve and support a bit of critical thinking of the AI system's purpose. So to as well implement AI ethics officer or board within the company. And AI ethics is also no contradiction to run a successful business. Even as well to consider this for the future for global collaboration. And finally, what is also important is that AI is not only about technology. So therefore, also to consider diversity and as well different professions within the AI system development. So therefore, I would like to say thank you very much for the presentation, and feel free to try the framework. And if you need any help or if you have any further questions, please just come back to me either now in the Q&A or just by contacting me on the website. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This was great. It's a really well thought framework. I mean, compliment. And I will right away switch to the audience questions. We have 6 minutes, so let's run. And everybody who doesn't get his question asked, please write directly to Joseph. I think that's the best way. But I start from the top because they're top questions from Anna Ortega. Which are the AI values most commonly self-attributed by SMEs?
Well, there are different approach. I don't know if you can generalize this based on or I can only speak of the research outcomes of the findings, for example. And therefore, of course, transparency was a big topic because it's also on the one side a market a benefit for the market competition if you can offer transparency, but as well maybe consumers will in the future behave differently, or let's say they will just buy different products based on different ethical values.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and thank you. And Beryl Sirmarek, are those limitations only for commercial applications or also for the research projects?
I don't know now which limitations.
It was like it came. This I know where the question came. It came when you had this when you had about the label, no? When it was about critical applications, when you had to like.
Yeah. So this with the pyramid, for example, probably when we refer to this, the proposal of the European Commission. Those are for commercial usage. So private ones, for example, is written in the proposal is excluded. But as I can just say and repeat, it's currently a proposal. So that is not a fixed law yet, so to say. To answer this with the research, actually I need to say I don't know that how the research is now categorized, if that will be, so to say, in the commercial environment or private, or if there will be another one. Yeah. But if there's any like a commercial interest or business behind, so to say, then those are valid as well for public services.
Yes. Thank you. And Walter Quercioli, the framework seems quite articulated and complex to manage for the average SME or even large company. Seems more tailored for very large multinationals or public agencies. What is your experience about the reception of this framework by average industrial companies?
Very good question. Thank you for this one. Well, it is not only for big companies, actually it is as well for startups or for SMEs that you can use it. It is more as well a question on which deep level you want to apply the framework or how deep you go in. Because as I mentioned beforehand, you can just do a very holistic first iterations, or you keep it on a more broader abstract level. then you will learn quite much, because actually, like corporate values or your business model, you should probably visualize or work on that anyway when you operate the business. But as well, for example, to align with the sustainable development goals, that might be maybe new for some companies, and that is probably not so complex to go in to align with the product where it is contributing in a good or in a negative way, for example. But it's up to you or to the organization how deep you go in, because of course you can make more iterations, or you can say each of the 12 steps, for example, I make really a deep dive, and then maybe it will probably go more complex. But of course, I need to agree, it's as well a resource topic. And that is also, for example, what is a feedback from smaller companies, especially from startups, for example. But therefore, then we need also to differentiate between either if it will be legal binding anyway, if a regulation will come, then companies will need to work on the topic at least, independently which kind of framework they are using. Or you have, for example, either a low risk application where probably you will not need to do everything, but you can still take self-responsibility and shape a better product, or create even more transparency and see it as a USP for your company or for your product on the market.
Okay, so I'm coming now to the last question, and as I said, if you feel like, please also write Joseph directly. So last question. So very interesting presentation. Has the TIE framework similar goals with respect to Z inspection? Did you ever about Z inspection? It's z-inspection.org. So which are the similarities and differences? We can only answer if you know it. Do you know it?
Yeah, I don't know it in detail. I know the name, but I cannot compare it now. But of course, in general, there are different frameworks available. Probably it depends on your use case, on your product. This one, for example, the TIE framework is very on a holistic level, on a non-technical level, and as well the aim to integrate common good and as well the sustainable development goals, for example. And as well the business model innovation. So you really see it from an abstract level, from a management level, that you see, and to define, for example, the purpose of the AI system, or as well to define what is trustworthy and trust for your AI system. Because in the end, when you want to probably one day assess trustworthy AI system within the European Union or in the database, you also need to explain all these things. So you need to start to work on all these topics. What kind of frameworks probably you will take? There will be probably more differentiation in the future. So also this one is currently under evaluation. So also if somebody is interested in evaluation of the framework, please just contact me. Thank you.
Good. This sounds good ending. So please contact Joseph if you have more answers, if you want to maybe even evaluate it with Joseph. So please contact, and I will now say thank you for being here. This was great, Joseph. This was a great insight, and I hope I see everybody tomorrow back, because tomorrow we have Olga Hamama from V29 Legal, Du Famana Rechtsanwälte, with her talk on Artificial Intelligence Act, a closer look at the EC's proposal and its consequences.